Tex Avery is a wonderful, ingenious cartoonist.
To characterize his style, it's abrasive, fast-paced. He's very non-PC.
They were always scary and sexy and wilder than anything that I was seeing at the time.
Absolutely insane. The imagery was so out.
He went the farthest anybody has ever gone.
I just fell in love with those things.
Ew.
He wanted to make you laugh, and that was it.
Tex Avery was really the icon for the movie.
This is what can be unleashed from Stanley Ipkiss. It would be perfect. And I really thought, you know, how far can I take this?
After Walt Disney, he is considered the main influence on studio Hollywood cartoons.
He was the guy. He was the original. He was the one who really started making cartoons in this insane, crazy, funny way. He was really the first seriously hardworking humorist in animation.
Tex Avery and his cohorts at Warner Brothers are really in the great tradition of the silent movie clowns. They're really taking what Keaton, Chaplin, and Laurel and Hardy did and taking it to another level. He tried to do things that you couldn't do with live action, and he certainly did. When Avery has his characters do a double take or a triple take or something, he doesn't just have them stretch a little bit. I mean, he goes to extreme extremes. The body flies completely apart. I would say that his work is very, very fast. Things happen almost before you realize they're finished. And you'll notice in a lot of his films, life is dangerous. There's a lot of attraction, repulsion, a lot of frustration. All of your expectations are shattered. Characters will stop the action completely and sort of walk out of character and talk to the audience.
I'm fed up with that sissy stuff. It's the same old story over and over.
There really was no story. Basically, it was a bunch of gags that he layered together. In fact, he once said, give me an opening, a closing, and 30 gags, and I'll make you a cartoon. I mean, you know when you're watching a Tex Avery film. And he would take these fairy tales that everybody knew and just give them a twist.
Wing ship Cinderella.
Well, I'll be.
And then, of course, you come to The Mask. The Mask is in that Tex Avery tradition. The film is set up for these wonderful tour de force Avery moments. Ipkiss, as the Mask character, can whirl himself around like the Tasmanian devil. And they're just Quicksilver. He can stretch his legs out. And that's exactly what Tex Avery did in a number of his films. Then there is all of that Avery-esque bulging eyes.
The Auga face is that Tex Avery moment when your face kind of explodes. The eyeballs can spin out.
The mouth opening and the tongue sort of coming out. And then it becomes unmistakably Tex Avery when he's in the nightclub. I mean, he actually becomes that wolf character.
The Tex Avery cartoon in particular that I remembered was Red Hot Riding Hood. What I really remember about Red Hot Riding Hood was the girl and the wolf and this kind of primal thing. I mean, it was the wolf whistling at the girl and the eyes bulging out. And right away, because Stanley is so repressed, that seemed like a wonderful inspiration for some of the visuals.
The thing about the whole Red and Wolfie series is never before and never again will we probably see such a brilliant marriage of sex and violence being so incredibly funny.
Most of us here at ILM, and certainly those of us interested in animation, are great fans of the Tex Avery. So when The Mask came in, we pulled out all of our videotape references and, just started to really analyze it.
We'd start every round of dailies with a cartoon. The whole concept was very new, of digitally animated characters interacting in a real world.
There had been pictures in the past, films in the past, that combined cartoon animation with live action, but they were dealing with strictly two-dimensional animation, whereas this we have to have a three-dimensional character. Up till this point, it was pretty difficult to do and was almost unheard of.
That's Spicy meatball!
Traditionally, up to that point, the pursuit of digital animation was the pursuit of hyperrealism. And The Mask was going in an entirely different direction. It's like, what would happen if we tried to do this completely crazy, out-of-bounds, cartoony stuff? You know, exaggerate things, stretch them, pull them, yank them, abuse them. What would happen then? What would it look like?
So one of the first things that we did is have Jim come up, and we did a photo shoot with him. And then our art department went in and started manipulating his face just so that we could get an idea for how far we could take it and what that might look like.
And Steve Williams, known as Spaz at Industrial Light and Magic, was my cohort. And his team had the right sensibility at ILM.
And then as a visual effects supervisor, I would also go to the sets and the locations and supervise that.
He actually took my hand and explained to me sort of how it worked. It was actually a challenge for the crew whenever we would do these things, especially when the mask spun. A lot of things were knocked over, there was wind, and you know, it was more about choreographing the interactive reality of things that would happen in a set or in a scene and time them well, and then like put Jim in and let him finish it, you know.
So you actually have nothing at that point. You know, you have nothing. You're shooting just the background, completely speculating what you're going to do with animation later. That was one of the first shots we did where we just kind of took a little step off into the unknown and blocked something that didn't exist at all.
For the bouncing, we used essentially footage of him just standing there, and we'd stretch it out and shorten it as we bounced off the different walls. And we had the practical effects people who do all of the different explosions and breaking elements and things, so we had them rig it for specific timing. That's a problem in any effects film, trying to work out both the eye line, the pacing, the timing of the action, both practical effects and for the actors. And how they had to react, even in scenes like where Jim Carrey turns into the wolf and mimicking the Tex Avery. We worked closely with Jim on what that action would be and how he might mime that motion going on. So when he does the whistles, he has to pretend that his mouth is this long.
See Jim imagine for me that he's extending his face into a wolf. That footage is pretty funny all by itself. It becomes a jigsaw puzzle of live action, in-camera work, complemented by CGI work. A good example of the combination of effects is when Jim jumps out the window and gets flattened. In the great Tex Avery style. That particular jump was one of the first times we used something called a descender rig. I put Jim on that rig to get the tonsil shot and pulled him away from camera so I get the lens right in his mouth and put the little tonsil in CGI inside.
And then the next scene, we see him fall onto the pavement.
Look, Ma, I'm roadkill.
And at that point, then we go into computer graphics where we shape him down, flatten it out, and bend it up and animated it.
And my favorite, of course, was when the dog puts the mask on. I think it's something that nobody actually expected, and so when it happened, it was a big surprise and a big laugh.
When Milo puts his head into the mask, I mean, that was another thing. The trainers had to do some special training to get him to do that action.
I remember Chuck Russell saying, he doesn't have to stick his head all the way in the mask. We can bring the mask up to him.
Because I thought I was going to have to do kind of a reverse optical effect. I knew how I could start with the dog's face down and roll camera, and he naturally would take his face out, and I would reverse the film.
And I thought, well, we're going to have him stick his head in the mask. And the main reason is because I think then it made him a thinking character. For him to do that deliberately meant that he knew the way out of this situation was to stick his head in there.
Which is what Max did. Max did it.
And then we basically replaced Milo's head in all those shots. The dog, to begin with, was an amazing actor, the way he was able to hit his marks, but every now and then he needed help. We had to hang a little inner tube off the back of the pants to allow for the space we had to have, because when his head grew, it was so huge that we had to allow for that space in the shooting.
And then later when Jim pulls off the mask off Milo, we have to tell Jim, okay, you need to grab it back here because that's how big his head's going to be, and you have to hold the dog further back. And Jim has to pretend that the dog's licking his face and has to hold him back here.
Jim's performance was so expressive, you know, you knew exactly what timings you had to fit in the animation.
Easy, boy.
Jim Carrey's the perfect person for this film. His movements are cartoon-like, to go back before you go forward, or to go down before you go up, and then he's off in like 2 frames.
Jim was amazing that way, really got the concept, and really worked well under those sort of parameters that the visual effects people put on him.
Fortunately for me, Jim has such an active imagination that he could really visualize most of that stuff and really make it part of his performance.
Visual effects have now become their own star, and really The Mask was one of the first films to really do that.
And since then, ye gods!
Thank you very much.
If we were to do The Mask again today, it would be a much simpler process, you know, relative, although I'm sure they'd want to do something even further than what they had.
Freeze!
I think the free adaptation of some of the Tex Avery effects was successful because they were very good when Tex Avery did it, and they were very good when Chuck Russell did it.
Tex Avery's legacy remains, and I think his influence has been pervasive, and it'll go on. Frustration is timeless, paranoia is timeless, anger is timeless, and making us see ourselves in them, but laughing at ourselves at the same time. You look at those films and they're sparkling and funny, always funny, and I think that's the main thing. They'll always make us laugh.
I finally got rid of that wolf.
Oh, yeah? That's what you think, sister.